Why is she here, he mutters, gripping his mistress as if she might vanish. But it's not the mistress the room notices. It's the wife he tried to replace, walking in with the calm of a queen who already knows the ending. The mistress stiffens, cheeks burning, as every pair of eyes shifts away from her glossy dress and lands on the woman she thought was out of the picture. But tonight, the picture has changed. Completely. The billionaire swallows hard. He expected applause, attention, and prestige. Instead, the only spotlight in the room obeys his wife. Her posture, her silence, her power. This is where the story begins. With a man who believed he controlled the narrative until the real protagonist arrived. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below and support the channel with a like and follow. Ilara pushed open the heavy oak door of the dressing room without knocking. Dorian stood before the trifold mirror, knotting a midnight blue tie with impatient precision. The air carried the sharp bite of his new cologne, something expensive and aggressively masculine that made her throat tighten. On the marble console lay two ivory invitation cards for the Strategic Partners Summit Gala. One gleamed untouched, heavy stock embossed in gold. Monsieur Dorian de Montaigne and Mademoiselle Celeste Fournier. The second had been torn cleanly in half, the edges still sharp. Ilara's name had been sliced away like an afterthought. A lipstick-smudged Chanel pouch, Celeste's, lay half-open beside it, as if the torn card had been stuffed inside in careless triumph. Dorian caught her reflection and didn't flinch. "You're early," he said, voice smooth, almost amused. "I thought you had a board packet to finish." Ilara stepped closer. The torn halves of her invitation rustled under her fingertips. "You replaced me." Not a question. Dorian turned, adjusting platinum cufflinks that had cost more than most people's rent. "Replaced is an ugly word. Upgraded is more accurate." His smile was thin, practiced. "The room tomorrow night will be full of people who decide whether we float or sink. They want youth, Ilara, energy, someone who reflects the future, not the past." She felt the words land exactly where he aimed, below the ribs, precise. "And Celeste reflects the future?" "She reflects what investors want to see when they write nine-figure checks." He shrugged, already bored. "You built the engine, darling. Nobody denies that. But engines are meant to stay under the hood. The bodywork, the part people actually look at, needs to be flawless." Ilara's pulse was steady, almost clinical. "Flawless," she repeated, meaning 20 years old, blonde, and eager to nod when spoken to. Dorian exhaled through his nose, the sound of a man explaining the obvious to a slow child. "Meaning someone who doesn't make Europeans shift uncomfortably when the subject of diversity quotas comes up. Someone who doesn't require footnotes." He met her eyes at last. "You were brilliant when brilliance was enough. It isn't anymore." The silence that followed was absolute. No slam doors, no tears, no pleas. Ilara simply picked up the intact invitation, turned it over in her hands as if weighing gold. "You're making this public," she said quietly, "at the one event where every signature on our next round is present." Public is the wrong word again. Inevitable. He checked his watch. "Celeste understands image. She listens." "You stopped doing both years ago." Ilara slipped the torn halves into her pocket. The edges scratched her palm like tiny teeth. "Thank you for the clarity," she said. Dorian gave a short, satisfied nod and reached for his jacket. "Take the night off. You look tired." She left without another word. The hallway stretched long and dim, lined with abstract paintings he'd bought because advisors told him to. Her heels made no sound on the runner. In the study, she locked the door, opened the safe behind the Rothko knockoff, and removed a slim black USB drive she hadn't touched in 8 years. She inserted it into the encrypted laptop that had never been connected to the company network. One new message waited in the draft folder. Valerie Leclerc's dead drop. "Ready when you are." Ilara photographed the intact invitation and the torn one side by side, attached both images, and typed a single line. "Begin. I want everything." She hit send, closed the lid, and leaned back in the leather chair. The house was silent except for the distant murmur of Dorian on the phone, already laughing with someone new. She stared at the dark screen for a long moment, then opened the bottom drawer and removed a plain manila folder labeled Trust Documents, Employee Poison Pill. Inside, the original signatures from a decade ago glowed under the desk lamp. Hers, Dorian's, and 15 senior employees who had long since forgotten the clause buried on page 47. Ilara traced the paragraph with one fingertip. If at any time the chief executive officer engages in conduct that a reasonable person would consider detrimental to the moral or financial integrity of the company, she closed the folder, slid it back, and locked the drawer. Tomorrow night, the room would indeed decide whether they floated or sank. She intended to make certain Dorian learned which one felt like drowning. Valerie Leclerc arrived at the discreet Avenue Foch office at exactly 9:30, black coat still dusted with November rain. No greetings, no coffee. She laid a thin aluminum briefcase on the desk and snapped it open. "Show me what you have," she said. Ilara slid the laptop across. The screen displayed the two photographs taken less than 12 hours earlier, the pristine invitation naming Celeste, the mutilated one bearing her own name. Valerie's eyes flicked over them once. Childish. He wants you to react. She closed the lid. We won't. She produced a single sheet. Today's date, the seal of the Tribunal de Commerce de Paris already affixed. Emergency injunction freezing any transfer of shares or change in corporate officers, signed at 8:04 this morning. He'll be served at the office in, she checked her watch, 17 minutes. Ilara nodded. Good. Now the poison pill. Valerie opened a second folder. 10-year-old statutes, her own notary stamp on every page. Article 14 bis, moral or financial integrity clause. You drafted it yourself when he insisted on gifting shares to the executive team. One certified letter from the trustee, me, alleging conduct detrimental to the company, and the 15% employee block reverts automatically to the Dubois Family Trust. She tapped the page. You control the trust. Send the letter, Ilara said. Already drafted. Valerie turned the laptop back and hit send. A soft chime confirmed delivery to the corporate registry. Done. As of this second, you own 55%. The majority in every jurisdiction that matters. Ilara leaned back. Evidence? Valerie slid a USB stick across the glass. Private investigator finished the overnight sweep. Dorian has routed €1,234,000 through 3 shell entities registered to a Luxembourg notary who owes me favors. All labeled Executive Secretary Consulting Fees, confidential. Recipient account, Celeste Fournier. The apartment on Rue de la Pompe is leased in her name. Utilities paid from the same corporate card he swore was only for client entertainment. She clicked open a PDF. Bank transfers, timestamps, signatures. Enough for embezzlement, tax fraud, and abuse of corporate assets. The Parquet National Financier will open a preliminary investigation the moment we forward the file. Ilara scrolled slowly. Each line was a small, precise betrayal. There's more, Valerie continued. He pledged 8% of his personal shares as collateral for a private bridge loan last month, without board approval. That alone triggers default under the shareholders' agreement you wrote. The lender is ready to call the loan the instant I nod. Ilara closed the file. Hold the lender for now. I want him on that stage tomorrow, believing he still owns the room. Valerie allowed herself half a smile. Then tomorrow he discovers the room belongs to you. She produced the final document. A divorce petition stamped accept. Urgence absolute. Irrevocable. No alimony claim, no spousal support. Only one demand. Full confirmation of separate property regimes retroactive to the date of marriage. Signed by the judge at 7:55. He'll receive this one with his morning espresso. Ilara took the pen, Mont Blanc, the same one she had used to sign their original prenup, and added her signature without hesitation. Valerie gathered the folders. Anything else before I file the criminal complaint Monday morning? Make sure the board receives the new share registry tonight. Quietly, no announcement yet. Already scheduled for 7 p.m. courier delivery to each director's home address. Ilara stood. Then we're ready. Valerie paused at the door. He'll try to reach you when the injunction hits. He can try. The lawyer left as silently as she had arrived. Ilara walked to the window. Below, Paris traffic crawled along the wet avenues, oblivious. She opened the banking app on her phone, personal, not corporate, and transferred the exact amount Dorian had spent on Celeste's apartment into a new account titled Gala Reserve. Tomorrow night, the bill would come due in public. She closed the app, slipped the phone into her pocket, and for the first time in months felt the precise weight of absolute control settle on her shoulders like a tailored coat. Ilara dropped the last diamond necklace into the velvet-lined safe deposit box at Banque Privée Edmond de Rothschild. The clatter echoed like loose change. She shut the door, spun the combination, and walked out without looking back. No more borrowed sparkle. Back in the apartment, she cleared the dressing room in under 20 minutes. Every dress Dorian had chosen, every handbag he had approved, every heel he deemed appropriate, went into anonymous black garment bags for charity. She kept only what she had paid for herself. The tailor arrived at 4 sharp, a quiet Algerian woman who measured without small talk. Ilara stood on the low platform in nothing but silk underwear while pins flashed. Black matte crepe, Ilara said. High neck, long sleeve, no back until the waist. Legs slit exactly here. She touched her mid-thigh. Nothing that photographs white against my skin. The woman nodded once and left with the fabric bolts. At 6:30, the makeup artist came and went. No contour, no highlight, no attempt to look anything other than what she was. Skin evened, lashes lengthened, lips painted the color of dried blood. Hair twisted into a low knot so severe it looked weaponized. She opened the closet safe a second time and removed a single item, a slim platinum cuff watch, Patek Philippe, the one she had bought with her first architecture bonus 15 years ago. Nothing else. Valerie arrived at 8, briefcase swapped for a garment bag of her own. Everything is filed, she said, laying papers on the marble island. Divorce decree effective at midnight tonight. Injunction served at his office at 5:30. He tried to call you 17 times. I blocked the numbers. Ilara signed the last acknowledgement without reading it again. Valerie watched her slide into the finished dress. The fabric fell like liquid night, severe and merciless. You look like the verdict, Valerie said. That's the point. They ran the sequence one final time, voices low. You enter at 9:10, Valerie recited. Chairman Duval will already have the updated share registry. He owes me for keeping his son out of the fiscal police files last year. He will invite you to speak first. You say exactly what we rehearsed. 30 seconds on the divorce, 45 on the messages, 15 on the future. Then you hand me the microphone. I do the rest. Ilara adjusted the watch. And if Dorian tries to interrupt? Security has instructions. 2 ex-legionnaires on my payroll. He won't reach the 3rd step. Valerie zipped her own dress, gunmetal silk, equally unforgiving, then handed Ilara a tiny earpiece. Channel 3 if you need me before you reach the podium. Ilara slipped it in, voice muffled. Test. Crystal, Valerie replied. They stood in front of the full-length mirror side by side. 2 women in black reflected to infinity. No tears, Ilara said. No mercy, Valerie answered. The driver waited downstairs, engine running. Black Maybach. No flags, no plates that could be traced in under 30 seconds. Ilara picked up a narrow clutch containing only 3 things. The original trust document, a USB drive with every transfer Dorian had ever made to Celeste, and the torn invitation, now laminated, edges sharp as razors. She paused at the threshold. After tonight, she said, the company will have one face, mine. Valerie allowed the smallest curve of a smile. Then let's go introduce it. They descended in the private elevator. No music, no conversation. Only the soft click of heels on marble and the quiet certainty of a plan locking into place like the last round in a magazine. The car pulled away from the curb at 8:43. Paris lights streaked across the tinted windows, blurring into gold and crimson. Ilara leaned her head against the cool glass and spoke once, so quietly the driver couldn't hear. Tomorrow he wakes up a guest in the house he thought he owned. Valerie reached over and squeezed her wrist once. Brief, professional, final. The Maybach merged into the evening traffic, carrying them toward the bright lights of the Palais Garnier, where every major investor on the continent waited, unaware that the evening's true host was arriving 20 minutes late and dressed for a coronation. Dorian lifted a flute of Ruinart from a passing tray and surveyed the salle de fête of the Palais Garnier like a monarch counting vassals. Celeste clung to his left arm, pale pink satin straining against her breathing, eyes wide at the chandeliers and the titles being whispered around her. Relax, he murmured, steering her toward the chairman of the European Investment Bank. Smile and let me talk. That's all they expect from you tonight. She obeyed, teeth flashing too brightly. At 9:08, the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. Messieurs les investisseurs, avant le discours d'ouverture de Monsieur de Montaigne, Dorian handed his empty glass to a waiter and smoothed his lapels. This was the moment. The merger announcement, the 9-figure term sheet, the coronation. The double doors at the far end opened without ceremony. Ilara stepped through first. Valerie is one pace behind. Conversation did not die. It was executed. One by one, heads turned, voices cut mid-sentence. Crystal paused halfway to lips. The orchestra's background, Vivaldi faltered as the concertmaster saw her and forgot to cue the next bar. She wore black so absolute it seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The dress moved like oil on water, revealing nothing, promising everything. No jewelry except the thin watch, catching a single spotlight. Dorian felt the room tilt. His hand tightened on Celeste's wrist, hard enough to bruise. Ilara did not search for him. She walked the central aisle as if it had been laid for her alone. Pace unhurried, eyes scanning faces the way a new owner inspects furniture. Chairman Duval detached himself from his cluster and met her halfway. Madame Dubois, he said loudly enough for 20 people to hear, we received your registry update. Welcome. He offered his arm. She took it. Dorian started forward. Ilara. She passed within 2 meters and did not break stride. The dismissal was surgical. Celeste tried to follow. Dorian's grip anchored her in place. Valerie peeled off to the left, already greeting the CFO of Crédit Agricole with a folder tucked under one arm. Duval escorted Ilara directly to the low stage. The master of ceremonies, sensing blood in the water, yielded the podium without being asked. Microphone feedback squealed once, then settled. Duval leaned in. The floor is yours, madam, as the majority shareholder. A ripple moved outward from the stage. Phones lowered, deals paused. Predators recognizing a larger predator had entered the enclosure. Dorian's pulse hammered in his ears. He released Celeste and took one involuntary step forward. A black-suited security man materialized at his elbow, hand resting lightly, but unmistakably, on his forearm. Stay right here, monsieur, the man said in a polite murmur that carried the weight of a prison door. On stage, Ilara adjusted the microphone downward a precise 3 centimeters. The gesture was small, controlled, and absolute. She looked out over the silent crowd. 500 of Europe's most powerful financiers waited for her to speak. And for the first time all evening, she smiled. Not warm, not cruel, simply certain. Bonsoir, she said, voice low, intimate, reaching the back row without effort. Some of you expected a different speaker tonight. Plans change. She let the words hang just long enough. Before we discuss the future of this company, there are a few administrative formalities to clear. She made the tiniest gesture with 2 fingers. The lights dimmed a fraction. A screen descended behind her. Slide 1 appeared, the updated share registry, her name alone in bold at 55%. Gasps were not theatrical, they were genuine. Dorian lunged again. The security man's grip tightened, steering him backward until his heels hit the edge of a gilded chair. He sat hard. Celeste stood abandoned in the aisle, pink satin suddenly garish under the spotlights, mouth open like a child who had lost her mother in a crowd. Ilara's gaze swept the room once more, pausing nowhere, claiming everywhere. Then she turned the page on the lectern. The screen changed. The screen behind Ilara lit up with the first slide. 2 invitation cards side by side. One pristine, one brutally torn. Bonsoir à tous, she began, voice steady, almost conversational. Tonight was meant to celebrate a merger. Instead, we begin with a divorce. No gasp this time. The room had already spent its shock. Only the soft click of phone cameras. She advanced the slide. A single text message, enlarged with Dorian's name at the top. She's an anchor I should have cut years ago. Dark, serious, impossible to place at a European table without apologies. Sent 3 weeks ago. Another click, a second message, same thread. Celeste understands refinement. You never did. Ilara let the words sit. No commentary. The quotes did the work. She turned slightly toward the aisle where Dorian stood pinned between 2 security men. I considered keeping this private, she continued, but privacy is a luxury reserved for those who show respect. You chose to announce your replacement on an invitation. I simply accepted the invitation. Celeste made a small wounded sound and took 1 step back, pink satin rustling like cheap wrapping paper. Ilara advanced to the final slide, a plain white screen with black text. Decree of divorce rendered absolute at midnight. No financial claims from either side. Separate property regime confirmed retroactively. The company, however, is not marital property. It is mine. She set the remote down. I am not here to beg for sympathy. I am here to inform you that the person who called me an embarrassment now answers to me. Permanently. Dorian finally found his voice. This is theater, he shouted, straining against the security hold. She's hysterical. The microphone in Alara's hand never wavered. Hysterical, she repeated, tasting the word. The last refuge of a man who mistakes silence for weakness. She beckoned Valerie with one finger. The lawyer ascended the 3 steps in 2 seconds and took the microphone as if it had always belonged to her. Duval, the chairman, gave a short nod from the front row. Permission, complicity, surrender. Ilara stepped aside, yielding the spotlight without yielding power. Celeste tried to slip toward the exit. A woman in a navy pantsuit, Valerie's paralegal, appeared at her elbow and whispered something that froze her in place. Dorian twisted again. Ilara, stop this now. We can discuss. No, Ilara said, voice cutting across the hall without amplification. Discussion ended the moment you tore up my name. She looked out over the audience one last time. To those who placed bets on the wrong horse, revise your term sheets. To those who believed competence had a skin tone, learn quickly. The company moves forward under new, unambiguous leadership. She descended the single step from the podium, dress whispering against the wood, and took the seat Duval had vacated in the front row. Center, elevated, impossible to ignore. Valerie's voice filled the sudden vacuum, calm and lethal. Maître Valérie Leclerc, counsel to the majority shareholder. For the record, Madame Ilara Dubois controls 55% of voting shares as of 9:47 this evening. Any motion, merger, or contract requiring board approval is suspended until further notice. She clicked her own remote. The screen shifted to the embezzlement ledger. Dorian's face drained to the color of old ash. Ilara crossed her legs, folded her hands in her lap, and waited for the numbers to speak. The room belonged to her now, and every soul in it knew it. Valerie did not raise her voice. She never needed to. Article 14 bis has been invoked, she announced, clicking to the ledger slide. Effective 9:52 p.m., Madame Ilara Dubois is the controlling shareholder with 55%. Monsieur de Montaigne's remaining holdings are frozen pending audit. The numbers glowed crimson. 1 through 234,000, or routed through 3 Luxembourg shells, all stamped confidential, Executive Secretary Services. Destination account, Celeste Fournier. Valerie let the slide linger. These transfers constitute embezzlement under Article 43215 of the Code Penal. The file was delivered to the Parquet National Financier at 8:41 this evening. A preliminary investigation opens Monday. She advanced again. A second set of documents. Dorian's personal share pledge against an unregistered bridge loan, 8% collateral, no board disclosure. Breach of fiduciary duty. The lender has been notified of default. Margin call executes at market open. Dorian's knees buckled. The security men held him upright by the elbows now, discreet but immovable. Valerie produced a slim leather folder and laid it on the podium like a surgeon setting down a scalpel. One path remains, she said. Sign the acknowledgement of liability, resign all offices, accept a modest retirement package equal to 24 months' former salary. No bonus, no options. In return, Madame Dubois will not accelerate criminal referral for 30 days, giving you time to retain separate counsel. She opened the folder. 3 copies. A Mont Blanc pen rested across them. Dorian stared at the signature line as if it were a guillotine. I won't, he began. Valerie clicked once more. A new slide. Bank notification time-stamped 3 days ago. Celeste's personal account transferring 80,000 euros to a Monaco real estate agency. Down payment on a villa, sourced from the same corporate stream. Celeste made a strangled noise. That was for us, she hissed at Dorian, voice cracking across the hall. You said it was approved. You promised the merger would cover everything. Head swiveled, phones rose like periscopes. Dorian's face collapsed. The suave mask shattered into something small and gray. Celeste rounded on him fully now, tears carving channels through her makeup. You told me she was finished. You said tonight we would be untouchable. Valerie waited expressionless. The room watched Dorian age 10 years and 10 seconds. He took one step forward. The security men released him. He no longer looked capable of flight. He climbed the 3 steps like a man walking to his own hanging. Valerie placed the pen in his hand. His fingers shook so badly that the first signature was illegible. He tried again. Ink bled where the nib dug too deep. Third copy, he signed Dorian Marie Alain de Montaigne in a child's scrawl. Valerie collected the documents, checked each wet signature, and then nodded to security. They took his arms again, this time gently, almost kindly, and guided him down the steps. Celeste followed 3 paces behind, clutching her clutch purse like a life vest, mascara rivers staining the pink satin. No one parted for them. No one offered a handshake or a sympathetic glance. They moved through a corridor of turned backs and lowered eyes. At the service exit, Valerie signaled. The doors closed behind them with the soft finality of a bank vault. On stage, she turned to the audience. The board will convene tomorrow at 9 to ratify Madame Dubois as Président Directeur Général. All scheduled commitments remain in force under her signature alone. She stepped back. Ilara rose from the front row chair and returned to the podium. The microphone was still warm. She said nothing for a long beat, letting the silence do its work. Then quietly, the evening continues. Champagne is chilled. The merger is dead. Long live the company. She descended the steps. The orchestra, forgotten until now, struck up a cautious jazz standard. Conversation restarted in a different key, subdued, recalculated, reverent. Ilara accepted a flute from a waiter who nearly bowed. She had not drunk yet. She watched the closed service door for a moment, then turned her back on it forever. The orchestra shifted seamlessly into a slow, confident arrangement of La Mer. Waiters circulated with fresh trays. The champagne now carried a different temperature, as if the bottles themselves had acknowledged the change of ownership. Ilara remained at the podium only long enough to be seen. Then she descended the steps and allowed the room to come to her. The first to approach was the CEO of BNP Paribas. He took her hand in both of his, bowed slightly and spoke in the tone men reserve for heads of state. Félicitations, Madame Dubois. Your vision for the next phase? May we schedule a private breakfast next week? She inclined her head. My assistant will confirm on Monday. He moved aside. The next was the German reinsurance titan, who had refused to sign anything while Dorian was in the room. Now he offered his card with 2 hands. Another followed, then another. A quiet, orderly procession formed. Predators recognizing the new apex. No one mentioned the scene that had just occurred. No one needed to. The silence around Dorian's absence was louder than any toast. Valerie appeared at her elbow with a fresh flute. Ilara accepted it but did not drink. Board vote is scheduled for 9 sharp tomorrow, Valerie murmured. Unanimous ratification expected. Press release goes out at 10:15. I've already killed the merger leak. Good. A junior minister from Bercy joined the line, then the editor-in-chief of Les Echos. Each greeting was briefer, more deferential than the last. At 10:30, the orchestra leader caught her eye and lifted his baton. She gave the smallest nod. The music swelled into a bright, modern arrangement, something composed last year by a Senegalese-French prodigy. Conversation adjusted its rhythm to match. Ilara finally sipped the champagne. Cold, precise, expensive. A young associate from Goldman hovered nearby until Valerie allowed him through. Madame, the revised term sheet, may we present it tonight? Leave it with Maître Leclerc, Ilara said. I'll review in the morning. He nearly bowed as he retreated. By 11, the room had recalibrated completely. Laughter returned, deals were sketched on napkins, futures rewritten in hushed, excited voices. The gala had not been interrupted, it had simply changed owners. Ilara excused herself at 11:15. Valerie walked her to the private elevator behind the stage. Car is waiting on Rue Scribe, Valerie said. The driver will take you home. I'll handle the stragglers. Ilara paused at the threshold. Send the signed originals to the vault before sunrise. Already arranged. They did not embrace, they did not need to. The elevator descended in silence. When the doors opened onto the underground garage, the Maybach idled exactly where it had dropped her hours earlier. She slid into the back seat. The partition rose without a word. Paris rolled past the windows, Oprah glowing gold, Place Vendôme deserted, the Seine black and glittering. At the Avenue Montaigne apartment, she dismissed the driver for the night. The concierge held the door, eyes carefully averted from the fact that Monsieur de Montaigne would not be returning. Inside, the penthouse was exactly as she had left it. Garment bags gone, surfaces bare, the safe standing open and empty. She poured one finger of 1978 Armagnac from the decanter Dorian had never learned to appreciate, carried it to the terrace, and stepped into the cold. The city stretched beneath her, indifferent and eternal. She raised the glass. Not in triumph, not in bitterness, but in simple acknowledgement. The empire she had architected in the shadows was now hers in the light. She drank. Somewhere below, a siren faded into the distance. The night absorbed it, the way it would absorb everything that had happened tonight. Tomorrow the headlines would scream, analysts would scramble, markets would open with her name on every screen. None of it mattered more than this moment. Standing alone on the terrace of a kingdom she had quietly seized, wearing black that no longer needed permission. Ilara set the empty glass on the railing and went inside. She did not look back. And that, my friends, is how Ilara Dubois turned 22 years of calculated contempt into one unforgettable night of absolute reckoning. No tears, no screams, just precision, power, and the coldest form of justice served in front of the very people who once looked straight through her. From the torn invitation to the final signature on the marble podium, she didn't just take back her empire. She reminded every woman watching that silence is not surrender, and elegance can be the sharpest blade of all. What about you? Would you have been that calm, that lethal? Or would you have burned the whole room down? Drop your thoughts below. I read every single one. Thank you for staying with me through all 7 chapters of The Counterattack of Ilara Dubois. Your likes, shares, and comments are what keep these stories alive. See you at the next one. Stay fierce.